Hello and namaste. Welcome to another episode of the Almost Daily Zencast. I'm your always eccentric host, the incorrigible Mr. Zebo. Let's get started. The Divine Feminine, Goddess Mother. She's back, as it were, or coming back. She is an ascendancy. All of those words fail because she never went nowhere. She's always been here. She's always been this place that we call Earth. Let's take a good hard look at what's wrong with the world. And don't misunderstand me, dear listeners. If you're new or if you're easily triggered, be warned. My show is not for the faint of heart. But let's take a good hard look at our history and acknowledge that things are crazy, things are radically out of balance, and generally speaking, we as a species seem to be on a self-destruction kick. Like we're out to see how far we can push the self-destruction button. How much harder we can push it before we, blow up. And now, don't dismiss me as a feminist when I say that at the core of the problem is our addiction to misogyny and, male entitlement. Now, why did I say don't dismiss me as a feminist? Because I think that guys are not ready to hear what I'm going to talk about. And that those who are most adamantly opposed to what needs to be said, that's gonna be one of their go-to dismissals. And also, I may not comply with what feminists, expect from feminism as presented by a guy. I'm not trying to. That's the other thing. Well-intentioned people will miscategorize what they think is my motivation or my intent and then miss the point because they're busy with the precepts and the the preconceived notions of what, a man who's a feminist might say, or a guy who says he's a hippie or whatever. People miscategorize me all the time. And then they tend to miss the point until I bring them full circle and go, hey, I wasn't that category you were trying to categorize me, was I? Now listen to the grander picture. Dear brothers and sisters of the human species, we are fucked. We have been doing horrible, horrible things to ourselves and to each other for so long that we've sublimated the damage, the trauma, and I mean all of us. I'm not trying to pin blame or associate guilt with any one individual. As I like to say, we are society. We cannot separate ourselves from society. So what good does blaming society do? Blame society? Well, you got to take ownership of it because you are society. Our society is a clusterfuck of mess, it's a hot mess. It's a hot clusterfuck mess. Right? There's no denying it. And I'm trying to be funny here. We have to be able to laugh about it. As individuals, we don't feel like we are that fucked up. And that may or may not be an accurate perception of self. May I humbly propose the following thesis. Humanity has been out of whack, out of balance, off kilter, and on a self-destruction spiral or ego trap for a very, 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 very long time. Longer than normative history will account for, or can account for. In other words, what I mean to say is that this systemic problem goes back further than whatever your favorite starting point might be. So, if you're a Christian and you think the world is only a couple of thousand years old, well, this problem's older than that, right? If you're a postmodern derivative Christian, you've probably been peddled that line that the world is only like 6,000 or 7,000 years old. It's been here forever. Maybe not forever, but it's been here a lot longer than 6,000 or 7,000 years. And so have we. I don't mean to pick on my Christians. They're my brothers and sisters as much as everyone else is, because we were all 99.999999999999999999999999999%. So 99.1,000 nines. It's like pi. The nines could go on forever. We are this close to being 100% genetically identical, right? The infinite, beautiful array of wild, crazy difference in the iterations of human individual body envelopes, that's a variance of less than 1% of our human genome. Why is that? Because we have one mother, yo. Now, here is some evidence for why we need radical change. We live in a secular world whose ideas and biases and sublimated traumas and sociopathies are all based on the hardline, oppressive beliefs that came out of the three major religions of the world. But those major religions were hijacked by something older than religion. Right? And for those of you who've been following along, you'll know what I mean. If those of you who are new to the show, catch up. Because I'm at the forefront of a thesis, and I'm driving to a deeper point than any I've taken a stab at before. Now, you've probably heard of sacred geometry. All right, setting aside the issue of organized religion, we know that it's corrupt and hijacked. We can get lost down the rabbit hole of some of that historical fun storytelling of how and when and why and what are the proofs. But let's just take it in as a given. If you're open-minded enough, even if you were a believer, just take it as a given, theoretically, that the organized religion you belong to has been hijacked. Hijacked not by people or a group or an individual, but by something cosmic, something deeper. And this is where we get into the area where people freak out about this war between good and evil. I've addressed that before. Put a pin in it and find it in some of the past episodes. But set aside that, and just as a given, and right next to it, put all of our societal institutions, from Hollywood to the White House, hijacked. All right? And I don't mean just here in America. I mean at a global place. I'm speaking to you out there in Europe and everybody who's listening to the show anywhere on the planet. Just replace the Trumptopian or American terminology for your local terminology. Our societal institutions have been hijacked. By whom? Like I said, it goes deeper than any one individual. It's a cosmic entity. And I talk about it at length in previous episodes, and I'll probably explain a little bit deeper here in this episode. But let me get past these givens. I know that deep down you want to argue against them all, but just follow me on this. That which has hijacked them is doing its cosmic job. Its cosmic job is, by divine providence, mind you, to be the bad guy. What am I talking about? I'm talking about ego. Okay, so we understand that. Well, guess what? One of the earliest hijacking things that ego did when it realized what it could pull off here in the world of material existence, it could keep us kind of self-slaveried here. It could keep us self-locked, self-entrapped, self-addicted, self-imposed oppression of staying here. The imagery I like to use is that it keeps us bashing our own faces into the meat grinder, merry-go-round of life and death. We're addicted to it. Why? Because ego figured out a way to fuck with our perception and our understanding of reality so thoroughly that we have forgotten everything else that there is to do in this cosmic, multidimensional, living, fractal entity that we call a place. Was that sentence too big for you? All right, well, hang tight. I'm going to unpack it all. But I want to get to a sort of aha moment. However you slice it, wherever in history you want to put it, one of the primary things that the hijacker has done or does and continues to do, because it's not like you do it once and it's over. The system of hijacking and brainwashing has to perpetuate itself, which it does quite well. It alienated us from Mother. Ego alienated us from Mother. Not your mother, not my mother, she's dead, and I knew her very well before she passed away. Not the body-flesh envelope womb that your body-flesh envelope came out of, but this cosmic, multidimensional consciousness energy being womb that we have all emerged from. And to be technically accurate, we're not done yet. We have not emerged. It is in a process of giving birth to us. Look at any of the postmodern constructions, ideologies, dogma, teachings, and the way the text is interpreted in any of the three big religions. And I think this may also be happening in the minor religions. And I don't, by all means, that's kind of a ridiculous designation since there's probably more Hindus than there are Christians. Let's put it this way. This is a scientific fact. There are more people in the world that believe that rhino horn has magical powers than there are people who self-identify as Christians. Let that sink in, my Christian brothers and sisters. And they are not all heathens and wrong. Now, everybody's wrong, and here's why. Ego hijacked our belief systems a long, long time ago. To give you a historical perspective, imagine all the history you think is real, and then imagine the Tower of Babel, which you may or may not imagine as a real thing, but take it as a real thing and put it before anything that is in the bucket of this is real history, it's been verified. It's before that. And I'll try to do a whole episode on that thesis in depth. I've kind of rambled in and out about it, on previous episodes, so you'll catch on. For those of you who've been following along, bless your hearts for listening to everything, and I hope it's all starting to build to a place that makes a lot of sense. So before the Tower of Babel, before, the 700,000 religions that came before Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, we've forgotten all their names. And 700,000 is just a made-up number I pulled to exaggerate how there's a lot. There's thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of prophets that came before Buddha, that came before... Buddha's older than Jesus. Jesus is older... I think Abraham's older than Buddha, right? So we start with Abraham as sort of the cornerstone of the Judeo-Christian Muslim trifecta, or Islam trifecta. And he's the oldest guy, and all three of the major religions sort of point to him as we have direct lineage. Well, guess what? When Abraham, the person, the real human being, was growing up, there were thousands of religions that they were arguing about and denying and getting over and, trying to erase from history. Because guess what? Even in Abraham's day, even in Abraham's great-grandfather's day, ego was already busy hijacking our societal, political, and religious institutions. Ego is really good at this and has been doing it for that long. And one of its primary tools, one of its original, aha, if I do this, the silly humans won't know what the fuck. And I feel very certain of this, that my own ego has conceded. You're right. This is one of the ancient mystic truths that people generally have forgotten. Plenty of people remember and or have rediscovered it. But that old, original aha moment that ego had was cut them off from mother. Why? Because father is a cold, distant, stoic son of a bitch. He only steps in when he's rewarding us or when he's giving us a pat on the bottom for having been really shitheads. Just to kind of cartoonify God. None of that is to be taken that seriously. But there is some sort of truth to the polarity of masculinity and femininity. There always has been. So why is it significant that I'm driving everything about this show to this point? If you do the research, should you care to take, this as a inspiration or a prompt and not something to be just blindly believed or full out rejected without thinking about it, you will find, if you do the research, you will find that every corner of the globe, or disc, whichever one you think is going on, because it's neither, it's the womb, from every cradle of civilization, from every birthing spot in her womb of wombs that mother has given rise to people, and we're all the same, right? We just coalesced in different locations. We just gathered and sort of created centers of civility and civilization in different places. But we're all one family of people. All of us used to have a relationship with Mother Earth. And by that I mean we honored her and recognized her as the divine equal to whatever Father God figure we were. The names are irrelevant. We made up the names. It's in fact the naming of things that ego, was originally tasked with. Ego's really good at identifying deviation and places of separation in order to divide and label. Ego's really, 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 really well skilled at that. That was one of the original jobs it had. And thus, when it took on the task of putting on the black hat and the black jacket and the black pants and the black boots and wearing all black and being the bad guy, because the cosmic game needed a bad guy, it relied on all of its skills: judgment, labeling, separation. So it worked its way into our language and into our thinking, and thus can infect our ideas, causing an idea that otherwise might have been innocent or even virtuous in its content or its impact to become a negative impact concept, a negative energy frequency carrier, a transmitter of more ego. You're going, what is he talking about? Here's an example. You got to take care of number one. You're number one. Everyone's number one. That's an ego thought. It's a well-intentioned sort of motivational notion that got hijacked right up and turned into make yourself the most important and everyone else less important. I was discussing with a friend on social media about ego and sort of its underlying function. And he had posted something that could be summarized as a little bit of waxing philosophical on the question, why does everyone talk shit? I don't have his post up in front of me, but I summarized the question in his post down to that. And I said, well, indeed, this is ego. Ego seduces us into being shit talkers. Why? Because that causes division and conflict. Division and conflict are always the goal with any ego trap. That's how you know you've fallen into one. When you find yourself caught up speaking hate, causing division, and creating conflict. And this is as it should be. As frustrating and fucked up sounding as that is ego's cosmic job. By decree, by divine arrangement, by our own consent, although we don't remember. It is now a time of remembering, folks. I once had a discussion, which I think is apropos to bring up here, with an acquaintance and would-be sort of, I don't want to say client, but I do want to say someone that I consult. Although they sort of backed off because they weren't quite sure or ready. But a series of questions led me to speak the following, which is something I had never prepared or anticipated, and it came with clarity and force. That there is a reason why we have that reference about there is a time to cast away stones and a time to gather. And while many have pontificated about what they think it means, there is a deeper, esoteric, sort of forgotten meaning. And that each stone is sort of a building block of wisdom. And that we cast them away, not because they're troublesome. We often get the analogy of farmers needing to throw away or pull up and dig out and get rid of the rocks in the soil. That's what I would call a postmodern, post-hijacking interpretation. There's nothing inherently wrong or divisive about it, but it does lead down the path of building defenses, because then those stones which are pulled from the field are used to build walls. Walls divide. And some of the ways I've heard that interpreted is about, making you number one. Taking care of your field. And whenever you get down that slippery slope of you are better than others, you're no longer talking God's truth. You're and any frame of reference, if you're talking my church is better than that church, my country is better than another country, my tribe is better than that tribe, you're no longer talking God's truth, my friends. And that's a simple thing that gets people triggered up as fuck, because they are proud to be better than others. The clearest evidence that all religions have been hijacked is that most common people in any religion are busy judging others, when all the founders spoke forgiveness, unconditional love. You cannot have unconditional love and forgiveness and also judgment. Now, where people get confused is that they conflate judgment for discernment. There's more on that in an episode I've already recorded. Go check that episode out. It's a really important distinction that must be comprehended at a deeper level, or else you get stuck in a loop of ego trap. going right back to judging yourself and judging others. And that, my friends, is what ego wants. Why do I propose to you that... oh, by the way, for those who don't know or haven't heard me say this before, in this living hologram, this place that is not a place but a living, multi-layered, multi-self-aware collection of living entities that is all one entity, there are many ways we can look at or understand it through analogy. My favorite is that this is a classroom. It's kindergarten. This is a classroom, and we are taking a test. Except we've forgotten the test is even happening today. And thus we've been wasting time with a bunch of other clusterfuck of fail kind of bullshit. And that is ego's job, to prevent us from even remembering that we are taking a test, that this is a classroom, and that we're supposed to be learning. The test is always, do you choose the ego trap, which keeps you here, trapped in this realm, in this classroom, forgetting that it's a classroom, forgetting that it's a test, forgetting that we have to graduate and move on. See, now, it must be made clear, many confuse these ancient teachings that come from different places, and especially sort of the Eastern. One of the common misconceptions is that we're supposed to leave this world entirely. That it's that when people like me say it's an illusion, we mean that it's fake. No, it's very real. It's just an illusion. That's a bit weird, right? We have been conditioned. By whom do you think? Ooh, I wonder. Maybe ego. To dumb down our own language so much that it becomes even harder and harder and harder to comprehend the natural phenomena that we once lived in harmony with. Living in harmony with it is just evidence that we're ready to take the test and finally process the graduation procedure. So, needless to say, it's like we're in detention and we've been flunked a few times out of grade, and we're still in the kindergarten, and we're in detention, and we don't even give a shit that we're in detention. And we're not, as a whole, mind you, as a species, we don't have our shit together. All right? So, right, do you choose the ego trap, or do you choose enlightenment path? All things are this. Every moment is that question. That's why I say we don't even remember that we were taking the test. Because most people, you tell them that every single moment of their lives is that test, they'll look at you like you crazy. Because they're much more interested in making money and making more money than others. Madness. So ego alienated us from mother. Now, why is that significant? This is why it's significant. And again, you'd think that this would be well known because it's at the core of every ancient source for all the three major religions. But as I keep trying to prove out, those who operate these organized religions have zero intention in allowing the unwashed masses, which is us, the public, to realize all of the missing divine content which has been edited out, oppressed, and eradicated from the common parlance, because they are doing ego's bidding. And what ego wants is to stay here, and the way ego motivates those who have the mechanical leverage to keep us distracted enough to stay here, he rewards them with greed and mindlessly, pointlessly, mind-blowingly huge amounts of wealth. And that's the carrot and the stick that he seduces all of us with. Here's the why of it. The human species is indeed made in God's image. Now, you tell a common, everyday, run-of-the-mill, especially here in America, non-denominational, New Age, they don't like the term New Age, They're now very opposed to New Age. But, postmodern Christian, if you ask them about creation, they'll say, "Oh yeah, God created us in His image." What about Mother God? God is Mother, and they'll be like, "Oh no, there's no God as Mother. That's heresy. That's some sort of New Age. That's to get demons inside you." And blah 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 blah. But where in nature, where in God's green earth, except for rare occasions in which the creature itself is androgynous or genderless at all, where does any gendered body form not require a mother and a father? Here is, to the best of my understanding, my summary without references. You have to take my word for it or go do your own research. You've got the world's largest library sitting at your keyboard. Look things up and then read both sides of the argument. But here's the missing esoteric data that your common everyday Christian, your common everyday practicing Jew, and your common everyday practicing Muslim does not have access to. They have been denied this knowledge. The divine source unfolded itself in order to emanate outwards from its unity and thus be able to manifest, dream up, or think everything into existence. Some cultures say that the universe is the song of God. Those words are all not enough. Mathematics can put it much more accurately, but then, it seems as though it's not a divine unity doing it. But that's only because of their particular choice of language. There are believers and non-believers of every kind in science, and it is not a monolith of atheism the way many alarmists would have you think, or science deniers. In their most altruistic form, all of these institutions are striving to do the same thing, which is describe the universe. What is the universe? A living, holographic, divine entity with many consciousness levels that is striving to give birth to you. And by that I mean to say that you, yourself right now, as you are, in your car, on your bicycle, or whatever it is you're doing as you're listening to this, you are not born yet. More about that on a future episode. But if you're dying, look up The Egg on YouTube. I have a collection of it on my original YouTube page, a short playlist with all the coolest versions of The Egg that I've come across. There's other versions, but this is like my hand-curated, my hand-selected, selection for like the best, the most interesting. And taken all together over and over and over again gives you a really great analogy to give you a sense of what divine reality might be like. In pragmatic terms, though, here in the material plane, we've already had sort of individuated ourselves and begun this experiment of, what more can we get out of individuation? And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. The whole idea of interpreting the fall of man as some sin or whatever, that's just to keep you distracted and feeling guilty and hating yourself and judging yourself, which is exactly the opposite of what you are supposed to be doing. If you look at how religion manifests itself, in other words, the behaviors and the actions of the people that are, currently going to masses and going to synagogues and they're nice people, but they're not doing what they ought to be doing. And I'm not calling everybody a sinner. I'm saying we've all been misled. Even if you think you're doing a good job of living up to the prescription of your given religion, I assure you that we've been severely misled. And so there's a lot more that should be going on that we just don't even recognize. And one of those things is a balancing, a healing balancing between masculine energy and feminine energy. Take a good hard look at world history for the last, 6,000 or 7,000 years. The masculine has brutally suppressed, opposed, and, beaten and raped and pillaged and destroyed the feminine. It has been lifetimes upon lifetimes upon lifetimes of this misogyny, this hate, this being kept down by man of womanhood, of the entire half of the species. While self-sanctimoniously also worshiping them. Because we love women, right? I mean, now this has nothing to do with gender identity or alternative gender identities. I'm not trying to normatize. Everyone is free to love whoever they want. And we have to really reconcile the fact that we are way disconnected with our masculine and feminine energies when considered, in spiritual or sacred terms. We're the blind leading the blind. And it's a tragedy because, so many well-intentioned people with deep convictions and a passion and an addiction for one particular version of some particular flavor of their favorite religion, spending all this time telling everyone else that they're wrong. And what we're really, really missing out on is a deep, healing connection with God Mother. Now, plenty of people are going to get triggered by that and want to argue that God Mother does not exist. You know what doesn't exist is all the volumes of text that used to be part of the mainstream in all the major religions that has been edited out, destroyed, or somehow buried or oppressed. That's what doesn't exist in your world. All you misguided poor souls that genuinely believe in some kind of God but think it is impossible for it to have been a father God and a mother God. Here's what I understand. That, as I was saying about the unfolding and the science, and I got sidetracked on a thing, and I'm come full circle again. The divine unity was once all-encompassing oneness. It still is. That's the hard part to wrap our brains around, right? And that's why I keep touting that sentence. This is not a place. This is one area, one aspect, one facet of a multifaceted, multi-layered, multi-areaed, multi-dimensional, living entity of entities. It is a choir of divine being, all of which unfolded, was not assembled or created, it unfolded from the singular unity that is at the core core of all of the things that it unfolded into. There is no place out there where the singularity can really be traced back to. Because although, yes, the material world and its particles all can be traced to coalesce back into one big origin, that isn't the end of the line. And simultaneously, as it is happening outside, it is also happening inside. As without, also within. Which, as I've mentioned in other episodes, is a corollary to and has a deep relationship with as above, so below. Each of those are two-way streets. As within, so without. As without, so within. Both ways, my friend. As above, so below. As below, so above. Two directions. I digress. Why have we been oppressing woman? What the fuck's our problem, guys? Why do we hate women so much? Why have we hated, and every individual guy's going to go, but, I don't hate women. Yeah, I know, but it's time to grow a real pair, and by that I mean a spiritual pair. Grow your spiritual set of fucking cojones, and step up to the fucking mic that as a species, as one half of the species that is heavily reliant, especially if we strip away all our technology, we are deeply dependent on the woman and its womb. And I didn't mean to objectify woman and it there, but by that I mean that this applies on all fractal levels. So there's more than women of the human species involved here. There's the entire spectrum of all femininity. And by that, so when I use it to refer, I use the divine it. Especially if I'm speaking in association to, what might be interpreted as people. So for clarity there, so men, masculinity on its own is useless and a dead end. It's self-destructive. Its tendency to need, and now I'm talking about the energies, right? We have to reconnect with and honor and understand our energies. They are true energies in the universe. The divine being in its unfolding, what do you think it very first unfolded into? Two opposites. It was once unity, wholeness, completeness. Everything was within it. Everything was it. It was everything. And not only everything, but all potentiality for all things. And in its very primary unfolding, it needed to unfold into two opposites that could then relate to each other and provide itself two perspectives from which to know itself. Those two primaries are God, Father, and God, Mother. And before God, Father, and God, Mother is the unity of consciousness that we call the all-encompassing God. And it'd be awesome if we had better words for this. So instead of arguing about oldie-timey words that are limited in scope anyways, and don't mean what they used to mean, we could maybe be sharing ideas about new words, with new words, about these concepts which are infinite and ageless in their meaning. So, ego hijacks everything and then convinces us that mother don't exist. Oh, there's no such thing as mother. There's just father. And you really, really got to listen to him and his rules. And then when he tells you to go kill other people, you really got to go kill those motherfuckers because they got to die. And then, flash forward a few millennia, boom, here we are. Forgive me for oversimplifying it, I guess. For rambling for 43 minutes to oversimplify it. But I humbly propose to you that is precisely what is going on. And that right now, and it's been happening for some time, but we are in a peak moment of the return of the divine feminine to our consciousness. It's gone nowhere. But we, as a species, are finally unshackling ourselves from our own brainwashing, from our own oppression, from our own limiting belief systems, and reconnecting to what actually is. As I've always tried to point out in various ways, beliefs blinder you. They can also bolster you, and belief is a powerful tool. What you choose to focus your attention and believe in, or belief, if you focus your belief and your attention and your energy on something, the universe will try to manifest that if it doesn't exist. And if it does exist, it'll try to make it, part of your reality in a meaningful and significant way. Why? Because that's the game. That's one of the many weird parts of the way this game is set up. And it's all a test. And we are at a really critical moment Why is it a moment of such importance now? Because we have been given enough shock and awe, we have been rattled hard enough that some of us are looking around going, what the fuck? And looking within for clarity, asking, begging, praying for guidance. And Mother's always been there with guidance. We just don't allow ourselves to hear her. And her guidance is simple. All of our mothers have probably literally said this to us. Our actual body, physical mothers probably said this to us. Shut up and sit down. They probably said it right around dinner time or when it was time to do homework or something like that. But I humbly propose to you that Mother Earth is asking us very strongly to shut the fuck up, sit down, and heal. Meditation heals. Why? Why do we need to heal? What do we need to heal? Well, as Hebrew mystics and Nazarene mystics and other mystics, as Rumi himself, who's a cool sort of indie, I guess he's technically a Muslim, but he was sort of independent of all that. He was a Sufi Muslim, so they were really radically weird and different from the traditional mainstream Muslim teachers, especially compared to what we think of Muslim teaching today, since, let's admit it, most of y'all have no fucking clue what's in the Quran. Just like most of y'all have no fucking clue what's in the Torah, and most of y'all have no fucking clue what's in the real Gospels. Because if you think the four Gospels that are presented to you in the post-King James version of the Bible are the end-all, be-all of Gospel, you're drinking the Kool-Aid and believing dogmatic brainwashing. Here's a fun fact for all you clinging to the Matthew, Mark, Luke, and James versions. In the earliest days of Christianity, from year 0 to year 1000, there were literally several thousands of Gospels floating around the Mesopotamia area. Okay? A bunch of them were probably a bunch of bullshit, but a bunch of them probably had deep esoteric secrets from the time of Christ that needed to be preserved, and that the very, very first council of gathering ye olde time books and calling it the Bible probably butchered a bunch of and destroyed and got rid of because they didn't want none of y'all learning these secrets. Every human being has the energies of both God Father and God Mother. Every human being is a yin-yang. Opposites in opposition, striving towards balance. Why? Because God itself was so. Jesus said it. Plenty of people in the Bible reference it. But do they teach that today? No. That's why most of you are going whenever I bring it up. No offense. I just get it challenged by Christians who are attracted to my peace, love, and grooviness message and then go, oh, whoa, 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 he's not Christian. It's like, well, I mean, technically I am. But I'm also a Buddhist, and I'm also, I'm a universalist. I'm a coexist universalist. I guess technically I'm a Unitarian Universalist because I did go and sign up, but I haven't gone to church there from that first day. But I digress. All of that is dogma. And all of that, as I've been trying to point out, is ego trap. What do mystics from every culture teach? If you boil it down, they teach how to commune with nature. Why? Because unlike the postmodern contemporary idea of nature being a static place, a dead, boring place, a collection of inanimate objects that are there for you to rape and pillage and commodify however you like, leading to such idiotic discussions as flat earth versus round earth, by the way, because there's really no point in arguing that, because we cannot see in the retarded, backward, heads up our own asses state that we are in. We cannot see but 1% of our mother. And I've made this argument before, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, because I'm sure rambled on about that before. But I bring it up to remind, and I bring it up for those who are new on this episode, that you and your body envelope, the way you operate it now, can only perceive 1% of what's actually going on in the entire universe. And that's not because that's divine perfection and that's all you need to see. That's because there's a progression we have not evolved through. And that we brought ourselves here in the first place. We once resided amongst the stars, not in spaceships, as energy beings. All cultures acknowledge that we came from some other place. So the issue of whether or not the genome started here or was introduced here, it's a moot point. All of this cosmos is a living choir of beings that are part of the process of giving birth to all of the forms of life. And we are inherently all each other. And, as I love to go on and on about all the time, that interconnectedness of all things, of all people, of all souls, of all points of view, of all subatomic particles in the universe, that is sort of the first gate. Until we wrap our minds around that and welcome that back into our hearts and remember it with our souls, as individuals and as a collective, until we do that, we're going to keep beating our face into this meat grinder merry-go-round of life and death that we're addicted to. And while that is happening, ego is winning. And I saw a great license plate. And bless it, if its irony and its humor to me is that that's probably a very sheepily brainwashed Christian that bought this license plate from some vendor that's profiteering on their belief in God. But ironically, it also really clearly spells out the truth. It just might not be the same truth that they think it means. But the license plate says, and it had a matching license plate frame. It says, I know the end? Or I know how it works out, or something like that. I know how the book ends. And then the license plate reads, God wins. And then, the frame is the rejoinder in it's fully spelled out. The license plate is, a condensed acronym. But God wins. Of course God wins. But what does he win? And how does he win it? It's probably not the bullshit that they're peddling you from the altar. From the what's it called? From the podium. No offense to any one individual community, to any one individual preacher, but we as a species have been hijacked by ego. How do I know I'm not acting out of being hijacked from ego? I don't know. Maybe because I spent the last 40 years. No, that's not true, because I'm 42. I started when I was 9. So let's round that up to 10 so it doesn't sound too crazy, because most people at 9 are morons and aren't doing anything. I was a moron because I could have at 9 been preparing myself to become a movie star so that then later I would have an automatic platform of celebrity already. But I failed that one. Instead, I was really fixated on just sort of learning as much as I could for myself. I didn't even do it as if in preparation to write a book, which I now have to sort of start over again. I have to regather all my bibliographical... I can never pronounce that word. I have to regather my bibliography and go back and reread books that I read 100 years ago, because I can't do math, and I don't know how many years there are between 9 and 42. Is it 31? Maybe. So for almost, or just a little over 30 years, I've been questioning and doubting and critically analyzing and researching and meditating and praying and then not doing it as a test to purge and start over again, right? And at the deepest level, the most resounding truth that I can share with you, and I don't claim to be special, and I'm not calling myself a psychic or a channeler or a messenger or a prophet or anything, because I think that everyone, I think that you and your enemy You and your favorite best friend, you and your mom and your dad and whoever else you want to think of that's different and not quite the same as you, that every one of you, all of you out there, have this inherently within you, and you just don't know how to use it, how to access it, and I'm not even, I'm sure there are much more efficient methods for personal self-liberation than the one I've sort of cobbled together. But my point is that I think it's true that Mother Nature or Goddess Gaia or whatever, the divine feminine, has been patiently pleading with us from deep, deep down inside to step away from all the external bullshit and look deep within, because we each have a job to do, and it starts with healing ourselves. Now, the good news is, while we're in detention in kindergarten and not realizing that the test is going on at large, the momentum has already begun. There are already people striving their own struggle and on their own path of remembering and reconnecting and recommuning with all this. And what I wanted to share with you specifically today is that there's much joy and beauty and healing already happening, and it's going to build. It's going to build and build and build over the next year or 3. We are in an era where the divine feminine is being invoked again, is being remembered and honored again. And the invitation is being sent out to you, dear listeners, whether you be male, female, straight, bi, gay, trans, it doesn't matter. All those are labels. Deep down inside of you, you are the child of God. Deep down inside of you, you are a luminous being of light that occupies this body form. Deep down inside of you, you are masculine and feminine energies that need rebalancing, a little bit of healing, and reintegration. That is the calling this year, my friends. That is the deep, urgent need that must be answered. Before we go tearing down the system in bloody revolution or sending our children off to war again to take out our internal traumas and anxieties on each other on some trumped-up battlefield, we must look deep within, and find those traumatic places that need healing. And as one Christian mystic, I think his name is Lars Moll, and I think I'm going to put him on my reading list if I haven't already. But there's a deeply moving book called The Law of Light, and I'll have to bring it in for a special episode of unauthorized and explicit readings. But to summarize here, with safety of not being sued, his research and investigation into the original Aramaic traditions that Christos, Yahweh, Joshua, was raised in indicate clearly that what's missing in postmodern Christianity is all of the teachings about the divine feminine, all of the teachings about Goddess Mother, all of the teachings about, and all of the truths about Mary of Magdalene, who was his consort, not his whore, as many would knee-jerkly preach. She was a whore. And that's because that proves that Jesus was loving because he healed even. No. She was as initiate, as enlightened, and as divine as Christos was. Because they, as they always are, as each true prophet always is, you can always, and there's a big issue because there's a lot of people calling themselves prophets every year. There's been people who, from the beginning of time, who call themselves a prophet of God. How can you tell the difference? The true prophets embody love, compassion, forgiveness, and transcendence, and all of their teachings can be directly related and anchored in these concepts. Right? If a prophet is telling you, give me money so I can take over the world, then he's full of shit. Jesus never took money, did he? Number one activity that Christian preachers do is take money in, pay themselves. If he were still in his grave, Christos would be rolling over in it. Well, I've been rambling for an hour, and I'll have to come back to this general thesis, this general area of the thesis again. But I wanted to leave you with some thoughts about this, and that's that. As I was, breaking into in this last few minutes with this particular Christian mystic and his research into the traditions that Jesus would have been trained in, at center of these mysteries, these esoteric teachings, is the reunification of masculine and feminine energy. That one of the core healing issues that we as individuals need to do is reunite inside of us. But before we can go out and find our soulmate, before we can go out and find that, it all seems to make sense. If you look at the way the state of the world is in, right? Divorce is through the roof, and we've been saying that for years, but it's like at 60%, I think. I think it's due to hit 70 or 75 soon. So single parent is the default. Our culture, our social and political circles or institutions are riddled with sexual predators. And like I've tried to say, that's going in both directions, because there's a whole movement, which is a really weird and confusing movement, which you want to sort of support at first, but then you realize, that's kind of gross and wrong, of women utilizing the right of free speech to think and behave and treat men like men treat women. If there's anything that the divine teachings tell us, is that retaliation and revenge are not the path. And yet again, we all have free will to do what we choose, so it's a catch-22. The White House is full of wife beaters, right? It was breaking news all yesterday. One guy's being, exposed as a chronic wife beater. He brutalized both of his ex-wives, and because of that, because that's automatic, your according to the surveillance institution, that kind of thing in your history makes you vulnerable to blackmail. Therefore, they have not granted security clearances. So that's like 3 or 4 dudes in the White House that don't have security clearance for weird reasons like that. And it's like 7 or 8 other dudes in general that have been exposed by the media as having had domestic violence criminal charges in their background. Are you surprised? Are we surprised? If we comprehend that for generations and generations and generations we've been traumatizing ourselves and carrying that forward. We've been traumatizing each other and ourselves because we cut ourselves off from the healing, love, nurturing guidance, and grounding sort of womb-like nurturing of our mother goddess. So instead, we've been neurotically, lying to ourselves about our Father God and giving ourselves, sort of Freudian anxiety left and right, and letting ego supplant whatever kind, compassionate, loving guidance we might have gotten from Father God, because ego has hijacked all our religions, right? And thus the world is the way it is. And oh, woe is me, there's nothing to be done. Of course there's something to be done. Sit down and shut up. Stop arguing, stop fighting, stop labeling, stop pointing the fingers, stop blaming others, and start loving and honoring your mother. And I say that with the tone of seriousness that comes from the pain of knowing what it is like to have been separate from her for so long, and then the relief and healing that has come from doing my own reconnecting with her. Call me crazy all you want. You won't be the first to call me crazy. Mother is waiting deep inside of you. And it's going to take some effort, friends, because it has literally been centuries. Because what do you think Jesus was rebelling against in his day? What do you think Jesus was speaking up to? The Pharisees and their radical, ultra-conservative, totally corrupt denial of the truth in order to control and manipulate people through that organized religion. And the truth is that we have both a Father God and a God Mother. And that to be whole, to be complete, to be healed, to be ready to pass the test and graduate, we must first recognize and honor them both with our clear eyes and see them for what they really are, as opposed to believe blindly in the constructs that ego has supplanted them with. The good news is they're both on our side. God the Father and Goddess the Mother, they love you. They are giving birth to you. They're not done yet. And that's the tricky part. I keep coming back to that to remind people that, to draw an analogy from lucid dreaming. You guys have heard of lucid dreaming? Okay. In lucid dreaming, they teach you to recognize that you are in a dream. And then to leverage your awareness inside the dream to be fully conscious as though you are awake in real life. Well, guess what? That is why do we have that phenomena inside ourselves in our dreamscape? So that we can comprehend that the same is going on here in the material realm. Lay down your fears, lay down your angers, abdicate them all. Look up that word because it means something really specific when you abdicate something to a higher power. And tune in, folks, tune in. Mother Nature has been patiently waiting for us to shut the fuck up and sit down and tune in for centuries. And I suggest to you that right now, at this juncture in history, it's a great opportunity to do that hardcore and double down on doing it. Why? Because, I don't know, this unbalanced, out of whack, masculine misogyny bullshit, this ego craziness that we're living through is enough, don't you think? Enough's enough. We've been butchering ourselves in the merry-go-round of meat grinderiness long enough, haven't we? I, for one, humbly suggest to you that yes, it's been long enough. Well, I'm going to shut up because I've been rambling for quite some time. I'm going to practice what I preach. I'm going to shut up and sit down and meditate. And then I'm going to, be productive the rest of my day. Om Shanti Medishanti Om Namaste. Satnam. Thank you for listening, dear listener, dear audience. And know that I speak these words with love and compassion, non-judgmentally, and with deep, deep, deep energy of healing and self-liberation being sent to you through your earballs into your soul. Because I love you. And that's what we're all supposed to be doing. Until next time, this has been your always eccentric, radical spiritual revolutionary host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo.